Welcome to this explainer. Okay, today we are unpacking one of the most intensely dramatic and, honestly, consequential periods in modern history. We're talking about the final year before India's independence. You can really think of it like a high-stakes political chess match, where the decisions made by just a handful of leaders would ultimately reshape the map of the world and alter the lives of millions. We'll be walking through the incredible events that unfolded between January 1946 and August 1947, a chaotic period that's rarely mapped out with all its intricate twists and turns.
Okay, let's dive into this. Consider this stark warning from Muhammad Ali Jinnah, the leader of the Muslim League. India would either be divided or destroyed. Now, this wasn't just some political rhetoric thrown around for votes. It immediately establishes the literal life or death stakes of 1946. It tells us exactly where the political temperature was sitting at the time. You know, the question was no longer if the British were leaving, but how they were going to leave, and more importantly, what exactly they would leave behind.
Section 1. The 1946 Political Landscape. So, following the Second World War, the British Treasury was completely exhausted, making their exit practically inevitable. But the how was deeply contested between the Indian National Congress and the Muslim League, and the election results from that time brilliantly illustrate why the Muslim League's demands could just no longer be ignored. Back in the 1937 elections, the Muslim League had actually performed pretty poorly, but fast forward to the 1946 provincial elections, and the landscape completely flipped. The Muslim League captured a staggering 87% of the seats reserved for Muslims. This gave Jinnah immense leverage. He could now conclusively prove to the British that he had the solid backing of the Muslim electorate. This forced the British to negotiate with him, not as some secondary figure, but as a primary power player right alongside the Congress.
So how did Jinnah get to this point? Let's trace what is really a fascinating ideological shift. Back in 1920, Jinnah was actually a member of the Congress Party. He was secular, he actively praised Gandhi, and he strongly opposed religious mob hysteria, even going so far as to disagree with Gandhi's civil disobedience approach because he favored strict constitutional methods. But over the course of 26 years, feeling increasingly neglected and isolated by the political direction of the Congress, a massive shift occurred. By 1946, he'd returned from a stint in London as a completely different political figure, outright declaring himself the sole spokesperson of Muslims and demanding a separate nation.
And you can really see how the pressure was building month by month. In February 1946, you have the Royal Navy Mutiny, which sent a huge signal that the British were losing control of their armed forces. By March, the British Prime Minister sends the cabinet mission to India to desperately negotiate an exit. And by August, the complete political deadlock results in the announcement of Direct Action Day. The clock was ticking rapidly, and the pressure was just mounting on all sides to find some sort of solution before the entire country imploded.
Section 2. The Cabinet Mission's Failure.
This brings us to the British attempt to leave behind a united, albeit loosely connected, India. The Cabinet Mission Plan proposed a pretty fascinating geographic strategy. Instead of partitioning the country, it proposed grouping provinces into 3 sections: Section A for Hindu-majority areas and Sections B and C for Muslim-majority areas in the northwest and east. The central government would be incredibly weak, basically only handling defense, foreign affairs, and communication. The crucial takeaway here is that because it offered Muslim-dominated areas significant autonomy, Jinnah initially agreed to this plan. A united India was actually, for a brief moment, completely on the table.
But, well, here's where it all unravels. The Congress, led by Pandit Nehru, didn't want a weak central government. Nehru held a press conference where he stated Congress would join the Constituent Assembly but, and this is a big but, they retained the right to change the Cabinet Mission Plan structure later. Jinnah saw this media statement as an absolute threat. To him, it was a clear sign that Congress would just force its ideology once the British officially left. In response, Jinnah immediately rejected the entire Cabinet Mission Plan. Just like that, the fragile compromise shattered.
Section 3. Direct Action and Escalation.
With the diplomatic route officially collapsing, we shift from elite political maneuvering in drawing rooms to the absolutely devastating reality on the ground. Following his withdrawal from the plan, Jinnah declared August 16, 1946 as Direct Action Day to press for the creation of Pakistan. The epicenter of this was Bindal, where the local chief minister basically gave free rein to antisocial elements. The tragic, horrific result is captured perfectly in this chilling quote from the book Freedom at Midnight. By the time the massacre was over, Calcutta had become a city of corpses. Thousands were literally killed in a matter of days as these high-level political directives unleashed deadly street riots. And the juxtaposition of events here is just chilling. On August 15th, Nehru and Jinnah were actually meeting face-to-face, discussing concessions to seek peace. A mere 24 hours later, the Direct Action Day violence exploded. And by October, the violence had completely spiraled into the terrible Noakhali riots. You essentially had politicians discussing peace while the streets rapidly descended into absolute chaos.
Section 4. The Interim Government Struggle.
Right in the midst of this violence, the British forced the formation of an interim government. So the crucial point to understand is how this government functioned, or rather, how it absolutely didn't. Initially, the Muslim League flat out refused to join a Congress-led interim government. Later on, realizing they were losing critical influence, Jinnah agreed. He nominated Liaquat Ali Khan and demanded 5 key ministries. But instead of actually cooperating, the government was completely paralyzed by internal interference. Literally every single decision was fought over. This constant paralysis ultimately convinced Nehru and Patel that sharing power in a united India might simply be ungovernable.
Now, while the government in Delhi was gridlocked in endless debates, Mahatma Gandhi took a completely different approach. He left the capital and walked barefoot across 180 kilometers, visiting 47 riot-torn villages in Noakhali. His goal was this desperate, micro-level crusade to forge peace. He would literally find one Hindu and one Muslim leader in every village and ask them to live under the exact same roof as guarantors of peace. He firmly believed that if everyday citizens united on the ground, partition could be entirely avoided.
But sadly, time was running out, fast. By March 1947, the political coalition in Punjab collapsed, sparking terrible riots in Lahore. The British Prime Minister, completely frustrated by this point, sent Lord Mountbatten to India as the very last viceroy. Mountbatten's mandate was crystal clear: find an exit strategy and find it fast. By April, he was deep in high-stakes negotiations with Jinnah.
Section 5. Gandhi's Desperate Final Offer.
So I want you to consider this question for a moment. With the country literally tearing itself apart, the central government completely paralyzed, and the British rushing for the door, how far would Mahatma Gandhi actually go to save a united India?
Now, what's really interesting about this moment is Gandhi's shocking ultimate gambit. He went straight to Lord Mountbatten and told him, make Jinnah the Prime Minister. Let that sink in. Gandhi was willing to let the Muslim League form the entire government and have Jinnah govern a Hindu-majority nation if it meant keeping the borders intact. Mountbatten actually agreed to this, but only on the condition that Gandhi could convince the Congress leadership to go along with it. But when Gandhi took this radical plan back to Pandit Nehru and Sardar Patel, he hit an absolute wall. Having just suffered through the maddening paralysis of the interim government, they outright refused. They stated that the sacrifices of so many could not and would not be forgotten in the face of the ambition of one man. This was a monumental historical moment, right here. It marked the very first time Congress leadership definitively refused to follow Gandhi. And with this refusal, the dream of a united India was officially over.
Section 6. Partition and Midnight Freedom. Okay, so once unity was officially abandoned, the narrative shifted to the rushed, highly stressful mechanical steps of actually drawing the borders. Mountbatten initially proposed something called the Dickey Bird Plan, which basically gave every single province in princely state the option to be totally independent. Nehru was furious. He warned this would lead to the Balkanization, or complete and utter fragmentation of India. Realizing he'd made a massive mistake, Mountbatten tasked his political commissioner, V.P. Menon, with fixing it. And in one of the most incredible anecdotes of this history, Menon drafted a completely new partition framework in just 6 hours, literally between lunch and dinner. That is the frantic, almost unbelievable pace at which the final borders of these nations were decided.
That 6-hour sprint resulted in the June 3rd plan. Now think about the incredibly strict compromises everyone had to suddenly accept. Power would transfer to 2 independent dominions. Crucially, the massive provinces of Bengal and Punjab would be sliced right in half. The 559 princely states were essentially forced to choose between India and Pakistan based on their geography, with any earlier promises of independence or autonomy being largely symbolic at this point. Everyone hated parts of this plan, for sure, but under the looming threat of total societal collapse, everyone signed it.
The political signatures were dry, and at midnight on August 15, 1947, India finally awoke to freedom. But we have to look at this massive, devastating number, 15 million. That is the estimated number of people who were displaced in the ensuing chaos of partition. Think about that scale. And alongside them, over 1 million people were killed. It is an incredibly somber reminder of the staggering human cost paid on the ground for the political deadlock that happened in the capital. We'll wrap up this explainer with a final thought to leave you pondering. When a political game of thrones ends in compromise at the very highest levels, who truly bears the enduring cost of drawing those borders?
Well, thank you so much for joining me to unpack this complex and emotional history. I really hope this provided you with a clear, structured understanding of such a pivotal moment in time. Keep questioning, keep learning, and I will see you in the next one.